Welcome everyone. My name is Ariadna Vilalta. I'm the International Alumni Relations Coordinator in Esade Alumni, in charge of the chapter we have in South Africa, among others. And this webinar was an initiative from this chapter, the South African chapter, and Esade Admissions, represented today by Ursi, who is Admissions Associate Director in Africa, and with the collaboration of Esade Alumni Social Entrepreneurship and the Esade's Institute for Social Innovation, to put Africa in the map and to learn the best practices and the not to-dos when starting and scaling a social business in Africa. A good consequence of this new online situation is that we have the opportunity to bring at the same table 3 successful business entrepreneurs from different countries in Africa, from Eswatini, Nigeria, and South Africa. They are Claudia Castellanos, Esade MBA and founder of Black Mamba, Oare Ejemua, Esade MBA as well, and founder of OPL Academy, and Ntombenhle Khathwane, founder of Afrobotanics. We also have a very special guest. He is Ignacy Martí, director of the Esade's Institute for Social Innovation and professor at the Esade Department of Social Science, who will be the moderator of this roundtable. Ignacy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy and very honored to be today with this wonderful panel. Curiously, I wouldn't say curiously, but I'm the only man in the panel, and I think that tells a lot about what we are talking today. I think it's not by chance that in fact we have 3 entrepreneurs that are female, right, and doing very, very important work in Africa. So I'm very, very happy with this. So the idea of this session, I'm going to be very brief because I think what is really interesting is to hear Claudia, Ntombenhle, and Oeri to talk about their own experiences and their own challenges of doing what they are doing, and to reflect or to learn from them about what are the main challenges of starting a social business and also trying to scale it up, right, which is a very, very important problem or very important challenge in any context, and something that is often overlooked, in fact. Okay, so again, the idea is to talk about the motivations and reasons why they have decided to jump on social business in Africa, which is not obvious, I assume, right? As a sort of very brief introduction, as you know, and I guess is one of the reasons why you are here, social entrepreneurship, social enterprises, social business has generated a lot of interest over the last few years. So there are more and more courses in business schools and so on. What do we talk about when we talk about social enterprises, social businesses, social, I'm using these like a kind of synonymous, although we could talk about, but I'm not going to do the typical academic thing, right? But because there are difference between these different things. But basically we are talking about initiatives that try to uplift communities, right? They want to accelerate progress and also to create new jobs opportunities, right? And I think we have 3 wonderful examples of this today. Okay. One thing that is very interesting to note is that social entrepreneurship is often portrayed as a quasi-magical solution to a good number of problems in Africa, but also in other parts of the world, right? And this comes with the risk of neglecting some of the most important challenges of doing the job, right? And this is why we are so happy to have this panel today to talk about what are the challenges of coming up with new solutions, products, services to address some of the most, let's say, complicated problems that we can think of today. Okay, what are the sacrifices that come because I don't know they will talk about that or not, but typically one of the things that is said is that social entrepreneurs actually they have to make sacrifices of, I don't know, like they could go to normal business and this comes with more money, right? It might come with more legitimacy, kind of reputation risk, and so on and so forth. So they're sacrificing. It's nice, it's good, whatever, but we have to be aware of that too, right? And it's also risky. It's also risky, and in particular in contexts like Nigeria, like South Africa, it could be seen as something even riskier in other places, right? And the last thing, and I'll stop it here. And the other thing is that I would like also to discuss is the fact that sometimes when we think, and I'm talking about the white man in Western countries, we think about social enterprises in Africa as typically done by people like me, right? Or people, these are, I don't know if you have been exposed to cases on social enterprises. This is typically the things that we teach, right? So we have someone that goes to Africa to save the poor Africans. And this is wrong, and we have to kind of forget about that. But still, there are plenty of kind of stereotypes and biases that still happen when we think about social enterprises in Africa, right? And again, we have wonderful examples today of how people decided, I mean, we have Claudia, Oeri, and Ntombenhle, how they decided to do that, to jump into these initiatives, and how, I guess, difficult sometimes, and perhaps even today, and probably in the future, this task is, okay? So I think I'm not gonna say more than that. I would like to thank all of you, and perhaps to give the word first to Claudia to start, to share with us what your initiative is, right? And also to think a little bit about, actually, if you can tell us about what are the main challenges, where the motivation to start was, and some of the main problems or that you see ahead on scaling up your initiative. And the same for Oeri and Ntombenhle. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ignacy, for the great introduction, and also to Esade and to all of you guys that are here willing to hear a little bit about our journeys as social entrepreneurs in Africa. I'm very also proud to be sharing this conversation with two other amazing women entrepreneurs, one of them which is a very dear friend of mine that I can see there, Ntombenhle. So just to give you a little bit of background, I am the co-founder and CEO of a social business based in Eswatini, which is a tiny little country next to South Africa. It was called Swaziland until I think last year or the previous year, but it's one of the last remaining absolute monarchies in the world, and is where I landed as a volunteer in 2008. I got a little bit disenchanted of the corporate life. Some of us have this sort of like strange journey to get to what our purpose is in life. But I got probably my 30-year-old crisis a little bit later because I was 32. And then I started looking for opportunities for volunteering. Speaking about, the white savior complex that Ignacy just touched a little bit on. And I've always been fascinated somehow, for some reason that now I understand it was my calling, but I didn't know then, fascinated about Africa. So as soon as I received an opportunity to come to Swaziland back then, which I didn't even know where it was, I have to say I had to Google it because I've never heard about this amazing tiny little kingdom where I live now. I just Googled it to just make sure it was in Africa, which is where I wanted to go. And then I landed here. That was in 2008, and I landed directly to work with a social business in handcrafts. Handcrafts is a very big income-generating sector for women, rural women in Eswatini. And I had the opportunity to work with a great business that was working with many women as part of their value chain, and making a big difference amongst those communities. So that was it was such a big sort of experience for me that I decided to just literally quit my job in Italy, where I was back then, my corporate job. Everybody thought I was crazy. I remember my friend telling me, why are you moving to a tiny little country in the middle of Africa? You have everything here, you have your job, you have everything. And I said, you know what? I want to do this. It's amazing. I think there's so much potential for development. So I moved to Eswatini. I worked for a year or so for a big American NGO that worked for capacity building, skills building for handcrafts. And then one day I was walking with my now husband, back then boyfriend, and he was mentioning that back in the days he did this tiny little sort of brand that he never really sold anything, but it was called Black Mamba. It was chili sauce. And immediately my eyes from my marketing background were like, wow, that's a really cool name for a chili sauce, you know, you're like one of the most dangerous snakes in Africa. And then my mind started just working, and I said, why don't we integrate a value chain like the one I saw on the handcraft sector into the agricultural sector. And that's how Black Mamba started. It was a little side hustle at the beginning, and with always a purpose of being a social business. So it's something that Ignazi said also before, that how you define a social business. I think for me from the beginning was something that would work on what we call the triple bottom line, the 3 Ps, which in the case of Black Mamba are planet, people, and profit. So we do care as much as possible to be as conscious as environmentally friendly with what we do with our company, in terms of the people, to involve these small farmers that actually grow the chilies and the fresh produce that we put in our products. And the profit, of course, because we are not an NGO, and at some point, unless you have a profit, you can't grow your business. So that was actually very important part of the equation, that it cannot be left on the side. So basically, we started very small with a pot of chili sauce from the back of literally our house, and then started involving other partners. For us has been very important in terms of being able to scale the business, to have the right partners. One of them being a local NGO called GUBA that does training in permaculture and regenerative agriculture, which is the way when we actually grow our products. To get them involved so they could help us with integrating the smallholders into our value chain. But I think it was also very important for us from the beginning that besides the environmental and social aspect, we wanted to build something big and something that looked good. You know, our tagline is "Tastes good, look good, does good." So it had to be something that people would buy because it was awesome, and not because it was like, oh, we need to help, you know, poor Africans because we need to help them grow. So we wanted to get away from that sort of like savior complex and start thinking we need to create something awesome. So we came up with something like this. This is part of how our brand looks like. So it's very what we call modern African. So it does say that it's made in Africa. We're very proud, obviously, of our roots, made in the kingdom of Eswatini. We love the fact that it's called after one of the most dangerous snakes in Africa. But it's a product that you could see in any supermarket around the world. You could see it in a Whole Foods. You could see it in a Corte Inglés in Spain, and it would look good there. It's not going to look like, oh my God, it's a product that we all going to buy because we feel pity for the people that make this product. So from the beginning, we just wanted to show and prove that Africa has amazing products to actually bring to the market. So fast forward 10 years, Black Mamba is a very successful, still small business, but very successful business that has around 60 farmers in the value chain, that generates a positive impact of around 1,000 people in Eswatini, that employs only women besides my production manager and my driver. It's a very gender biased business, very gender biased, and that export products to a lot of different countries around the world. And I think it's a good business model for us. Kind of like a vision is to connect all those people that love sort of ethical food or nice food, but they want to connect also to where the food comes from, and creating obviously little by little this global brand that is supporting communities, being good with the environment, but also creating a brand that is, we think, very, very cool and awesome. So that's kind of like in a nutshell the story of Black Mamba.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Claudia. Fascinating. Thank you very much. We'll have plenty of questions then, probably later on. Okay, so we can move now perhaps to Ori, if you want to.
Yeah. Yes, Ignacy, thank you so much. And thank you, Claudia. That was awesome. I have to talk to you after this webinar to see how we can get Black Mamba chili to Nigeria, if it's not already here. So we'll have a separate conversation about that. But yeah, thank you once again, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Oare Yemwa. I'm the CEO of OPL Academy. How do I begin? I guess I've always sort of been very passionate about youth development. In general, I just sort of hate seeing young talents go to waste. In Nigeria, we have a population of about 200 million people, and about 60% of those people fall under the age of 24 years and younger. And when you think about the youth unemployment rate, it's currently about 14 million people that are unemployed. Let's not even begin to talk about the people that are underemployed. And so from a very young age, when I started working, I decided to go into human resources because I felt, okay, this would be a great opportunity to make a difference in people's lives. And I did that for a while, for about 6 years. I worked in several international companies. And then I decided that I wanted to sort of achieve wider impact, larger scale. And so I decided to quit my job and go do an MBA program in Europe at Esade, to be precise. And once I was done with the program, I decided to return back to Nigeria. So I'm what you might term a proud returnee to Africa. A lot of my friends actually thought I was crazy for wanting to come back, but I always kind of felt that, you know, my destiny was back home, sort of speaking to the purpose that Claudia mentioned earlier. So I came back home. I joined a private equity firm. I worked there for about 3.5 years. I worked as the head of external relations, and I also helped manage a foundation that they run there. So I was supporting local NGOs. But after a while, I started feeling restless. And so one day I decided to quit my 7-figure salary job. And I said I was going to work at the grassroots level and try and make an impact there. And so that's kind of how One Precious Life, or OPL Academy, got formed. Essentially, what we do is we work with high potential tradesmen and tradeswomen in Nigeria. In Nigeria, you find that a lot of artisans, so these are plumbers, electricians, carpenters, and the likes. About 80% of them come from neighboring countries or even other continents. And so this is a weird paradox, because I mean, we have such a large youth unemployment rate. And so I wanted a situation whereby we could train these young people in Nigeria who have a lot of potential and attach them to opportunities in the construction industry, where they could get apprenticeship training and also get access to full-time job opportunities. And the good news is that the construction industry in Nigeria is about the 3rd largest employer of labor. So I know that there's plenty of room to train people and put them to work. And also the time it takes to sort of upskill people in this industry is much lower than it would take to do something similar in, I guess, other industries, right? Like medicine or engineering or the likes. And so we've been at this now for about 2 years. So we started in 2019. We had a very good first pilot year. And we're able to train a lot of people. We achieved a job placement rate of about 85%. Connecting these young people to leading construction companies in the country. And this year we did have grand plans to train up to 1,000 artisans. And then our dear beloved COVID hit. And we were forced to reinvent our model, and we had to do that quickly, but it was a lot of fun. And we ended up rolling out an e-training program for our artisans, again, demystifying some of the beliefs that we had about training artisans online. We discovered that a lot of these artisans do have smart devices, and it was fun connecting with them on Zoom and other learning platforms that we used. And today we've trained about 700 artisans, and we've been able to expand our network beyond Lagos, which is where we're based, to about 5 other states in Nigeria. So we're super happy about that. We're also trying to bridge the gender divide. So as you can imagine, in Nigeria, it's not really commonplace to see women involved in construction trades. And so again, we're trying to demystify the sector for women in particular. And this year, we probably had maybe about a 40% increase in female participation rate. For the people that we are able to place in jobs, we're able to give them incomes up to about $100 a month. So this is about twice the monthly, like the minimum wage in Nigeria. So that's good. So we're trying to help bridge the poverty gap as well. I guess for us, when we think about scaling, it's obviously trying to scale beyond Lagos, which is where we're based, to other parts of the country, and eventually, who knows, outside the country. And we plan on doing this by using a train the trainers model. We're also seeking to roll out a digital platform that's going to come live first quarter of 2021. And that's aimed at connecting the more experienced artisans that we've trained directly to projects on demand, so in households, offices, or wherever they may be required. So in a nutshell, that's it about OPL Academy. Thanks again for the opportunity to be here.
Thanks so much, Ori. Fascinating as well. Also, super interesting. Wow. And so much energy as well, and passion. Thanks. Now it's your turn, Ntombenhle. Looking forward to hearing you.
Good evening. How are you doing? So yes, my name is Ntombenhle Khathwane, and I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Afrobotanics. And the name Afrobotanics comes from the fact that we use African botanical ingredients to make natural hair products, natural body products, as well as eco-friendly household products that we went into last year. I started my business in 2011, and prior to that, I had been working in government in South Africa. And I came of age in the late 1990s when South Africa, the economy was on a growing trajectory, a booming economy. And we had a president at the time, President Thabo Mbeki, who had a program called the African Renaissance, and he had renewed the African Union. And there was such positivity about the potential of Africa. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard of different slogans, Africa Rising, the potential, this huge potential that Africa is, that for some reason hasn't been realized. I worked for government for about 8 to 10 years, and I then realized that government is not the vehicle, especially in South Africa, and I think it's the same across Africa. It's not the vehicle to see the kind of fast-paced change that I feel the continent needs. And so I decided to start a business, and I knew that the kind of business I wanted to start is something that has to contribute towards changing the mindsets of Africans. So my business, how it is a social business, is that it's a social business in two ways. I believe that the reason why Africa has not been able to unleash its potential and to meet the potential that it can is because of the mindset and the psychology of our people, the citizens. And that is why we are tolerant of, undemocratic leadership. We are tolerant of corruption, and we don't participate in the crafting of economic policies. So if you look at the field that I'm in, the space that I'm in, using African botanical ingredients like shea butter and marula oil and baobab oil, these are the kind of ingredients that you only find in Africa. But most of the times those ingredients are removed raw from the continent and they go overseas to different companies where they are able to make beauty products. And that is very interesting that till today, there is no international cosmetic company from Africa to the world. Yet we have so many raw botanical ingredients that are used in so many of the big beauty brands. And I guess this is the same across everything, whether you're talking about mining of diamonds. We have a whole lot of diamonds in Africa, but the majority of them are polished and cut in India. They're not polished and cut in Africa. So I started Afrobotanics, and our tagline is "My Own Kind of Beautiful." And my whole idea was to get African women to rise and protest and claim their space against patriarchy, which keeps them out of the economic participation and therefore out of political participation. If African women, who for the longest time, through media, through history, through all sorts of types of stories, have been made to feel like they aren't good enough, they can't participate, they can't be leaders, they shouldn't be leaders because of culture, because of religion, because of history. If they start to feel that they're good enough and that they can claim and take part in those spaces, then I feel the continent will move forward. You can't have a continent of 1.2 billion people and have 50% of those people being able to participate economically, and not only just economically, but also politically. So by being able to activate women, by being a beauty for purpose brand, where we are constantly trying to find different tools and share different tools on how, as an African woman, you are amazing as you are, you're capable as you are, claim your space, get out of the, protest corruption in the country, get out of your abusive relationship, and go out there and create a better future for yourself and for your children. So we've been able to produce products for hair, body, and baby, and we're able to supply over 1,200 stores in the Southern Africa region. We are in countries from South Africa, Lesotho, Botswana, Swaziland, all the way up to Uganda, and we have a few stores that we supply in Ghana. And we are looking to become a global business as well. And so it's just like Claudia said, we produce high quality products and we package them in a way that would be appealing to a global market. And I think of recently, a year ago, we were able to start making inroads in conversations with retailers as far afield as in Germany. And this is something that's really, we're passionate about, because obviously we get our ingredients, whether the shea butter, the baobab oil, the marula oil, we buy those directly from African women-owned cooperatives, and we pay a fair price, and they grow these trees, and they process them in a sustainable way. So yeah, we've been in business now for almost 10 years, and we also put people, and we also put their ability to lead and to be productive and to be honored human beings in the forefront of it, so that hopefully we eventually come true or bring to life the narrative that Africa is a continent that can sustain itself and sustain its people and have an equitable economy and also have rule of law and justice and equality.
Thanks so much. Thank you very much. Very powerful too. Now we are going to open the floor for questions and thoughts that you might have, reflections. I would like to start with one, and perhaps following up on what Ntombenhle actually just mentioned. I would like to, if you could share with us, what are some of the most or some of the biggest challenges that you have faced during this journey? And I guess there have been several, right? And thinking, I mean, it's interesting that the three of you, and interesting or quite telling, the three of you actually have a very strong gender component, right? And as I was saying at the very beginning, I guess this is not by chance, right? And I think you were very vocal and actually very clear on that. But I assume that this also comes with, this is not easy, I guess. It's not easy in Africa, as it's not easy in other places, right? So what are the biggest challenges that you have been confronted? So I don't know, things related with misunderstandings, things related with people willing to defend the status quo, how things are, and I guess there are things related with this, and of course there might be other things related with the business model to make it work. And I know there are a few questions that are posed there, right? So I don't know who wants to go first.
Should I go first, since I was the first one that started?
Go ahead.
Challenges, I think, as entrepreneurs, and I'm sure Aware and Ntombenhle would agree with me, the main challenges that we have as entrepreneurs, independently of where we are in the world, is that we have to work really hard, starting from very small to try to build up something as a brand. So you work really hard, you go from up and downs constantly. I think one thing specifically to Black Mamba has been the really difficult way of getting access to capital. You can grow your business probably as fast as you can get access to capital. When you know exactly what you want, when you have the sort of, background that allows you to just think exactly what you are strategically. Sometimes the only thing that becomes a hindrance is the access to capital. We found that extremely difficult to get as a small business. You're too small. People say, well, we can't invest in you because you're too small. Specifically in the case of Eswatini, it's a very small country that doesn't have any financial resources itself to support entrepreneurs. So most of the times you get told, we love what you do, you guys are great, big pat in the back, but then that doesn't come with anything else. So there's no such support to go to trade shows, to actually grow in that sense. So that was actually very, very difficult and tough to work with. And another thing I think that is more, I would say you can probably see it more in context like in Africa, and I would say South America as well, where I'm from originally, is the red tape is something that is crazy. It's the lack of processes at that level when you need to set up a business and then you have to do something here, but this office is not in line with the other office where you have to do something else, and then nobody really knows how to actually work one thing or another. I found after 10 years of being running the business that the red tape is definitely a big hindrance and a deterrent. Some people just give up. Say, I can't deal with this. It's just complicated trying to work out on the documentation here, export structures, businesses, etc. So that was definitely a big sort of challenge. for Black Mamba. And I would say in our case, because we started from the beginning with the mentality of being an export business, especially because our market is tiny. Swaziland has 1.5 million of people, of which around 63% live below the poverty line. So it's very difficult to actually create a proper market in Eswatini. So, because we started being an export market, we were far from the markets that we were targeting. So the distance, when you don't have the sort of technological infrastructure as well, to sort of reach those markets was a bit of a challenge for us, for sure.
Well, I'm happy to go next. Thanks, Claudia. You definitely touched on some of the things I was going to say. Capital is a big one. I guess looking at it from another angle as well, if you look at the continent as a whole, you would find that a lot of international organizations that may have an interest, right? They may have an obscure view of the continent, it might not entirely be clear to them where the viable opportunities are or how to tap into them. And it almost seems as if there are not enough platforms available to help demystify the continent and just, create those linkages. So that's also a problem. Another thing I want to just quickly add is when I was reflecting on this as you were speaking, one thing that occurred to me is that as an entrepreneur in Africa, one of the biggest challenges you face is just defining what the challenge is, right? Because there are a myriad of challenges on the continent. And you almost run the risk of going down this rabbit hole and not being clear where the challenge begins and where it ends. And so you quickly just have to learn to focus and figure out what it is specifically you want to do. So this applies probably more to some interventions than others, but I definitely see the risk there. Another thing I would say that's kind of tied to this is just kind of having a good understanding of your value chain. So more developed countries might take for granted the value chain because in more advanced countries, those value chains may already be defined and developed. But in Africa, you almost inadvertently are going to backward integrate just because a lot of things have not yet been developed. And if you're unable to backward integrate, then you have to kind of create those partnerships, right? Those critical partnerships. And that's where your creativity kicks in, just trying to get buy-in from people. Another thing I would say is just access to talent, right? So there's a lot of raw talent available on the continent, but oftentimes you have to develop that talent, and that also comes at a cost. And if you live in less, in countries that are still trying to get their infrastructural development up to par, like Nigeria, you often find that the cost of business is a lot higher because you have to worry about things like power supply, water supply, road networks or core road networks and things like that, which just drive up the cost as well. So these are all issues. It's literally an upward battle. But I guess, that's where the passion kicks in, because if you're passionate about what you do, you find a way to navigate, go around a lot of these issues. So, yeah.
Wow. You tap into some of, there are plenty of questions and comments, and everyone is loving this. So, and many of them related with what both of you said so far. So, but now your turn, Ntombenhle.
Yeah, doing business in Africa is like beyond an extreme sport. It's very, very challenging, especially if you're a female. Just the cultural aspects of being a female. And just to carry on what the ladies have said, a lot of our leaders on the continent, for example, are now jumping on the bandwagon of speaking about the fourth industrial revolution and all of that. Whereas the reality in Africa is that, as Oare said, the majority of people are underskilled for a tech-driven economy. You've got a very heavy youth. I think 65% of our population is youth, but most of the majority of those youth don't have the skill to support a 4IR-based economy. And so I think, for instance, COVID was a very good opportunity for us as a continent where when China shut down, I had serious issues, and I know a lot of companies across the continent had serious issues because we get so much of our inputs, from China. Just to give you an example, we make a body lotion like this, and no one in Africa and in South Africa makes these actuators. So we don't have anyone manufacturing them. We bring them all in from that. Sorry about that. Even though we have the raw materials to be manufacturing, spray pumps and all of that, we just don't do it. So we have a lot of opportunity in Africa to go to the basics of manufacturing as a continent and become a manufacturing hub of sorts, even if it's just for the continent, because it's even hard for me in South Africa to do business with my neighbors in Botswana or my neighbor in Eswatini. We haven't even been able to start scratching the potentials of online business because transportation is so expensive. Within South Africa, it's expensive, let alone to Nigeria. If I'm trying to send stuff to Nigeria, it's crazy expensive. It's cheaper to send stuff to China than for me to be able to service customers in Nigeria. So there's so many challenges for us. And those challenges are also opportunities, of course. So if there were entrepreneurs who have ideas around how to make transportation of the courier of goods to activate online as a business, it would start creating so much value for the African market itself to be able to do business with itself. So I'm hoping that with the African Free Trade Agreement that's come into place, that will allow us to be able to tap into each other more as a continent in terms of trading with each other.
Thank you very much. Actually, as I said, there are plenty of questions here. Some of them, they are related with technological elements. Some of them are related with something that all of you, the three of you, actually tap on, which is the question of education and skills that both potential workers and let's say target people might have. So perhaps we could start with this. I mean, there's a question here that how does the level of education available in the workforce pose a challenge based on your experience? So is this something that, I guess, pose a challenge, but also something that you are willing to address through what you are doing somehow? I mean, this is probably the case for Ori in a fundamental way, probably less for Claudia, but and Ntombenhle, although for what you said, there's a component there, right? Okay. So I don't know, perhaps you can go first, Claudia.
No, yeah, we definitely had to make a strategic decision early on where to fight our battles. So we decided early on that we were going to target tradesmen and women who had gone through what we call government technical colleges or polytechnics. So these would be people who have maybe finished like secondary school and maybe have an opportunity to go to university, but have decided to, pursue a different path. And so these are the people that we typically would target. So if we looked at it two ways. So we looked at the formal pathway and also the informal pathway. So the formal pathway would be to target these people that are coming from these institutions. The informal pathway for us is targeting individuals who are at least semi-literate. So meaning that they can understand English to a large extent and write it and read it. And they also have basic mathematical skills. And that's enough for us to train them. And the training that we provide for now focuses on professional ethics and digital literacy. We don't do any technical training yet because just setting up a technical training institute is very expensive. So it is definitely in our plans, but for now, that's where our focus is on. So I would say education for sure plays a pivotal role in just determining, what sort of participants make it into the classroom or not.
You want to add something, Ntombenhle, Claudia?
Yeah. So, I feel like our African systems of education are not changing and keeping up with how the world is changing and what the workforce is required. There's so many opportunities that we could be training people in, especially like in my field. In my field, I obviously want to be getting to a point where I have my own research and development unit that is producing, why shouldn't we be one of the leaders in coming up with the latest botanical extracts? There's all sorts of botanical ingredients here that we could use to tap into for medical reasons and for beauty purposes, but you don't have that. We have to get some international business or pharmaceutical company to come and do that. So our government or private sector could actually lead a change in how we train children, how we channel the youth in terms of opportunities. Entrepreneurship isn't something still not taught at schools. Even I feel like a lot of the times our curriculums are just not producing enough critical thinkers so that people are actually agile and able to change course when they go into universities and to think, okay, what this that I'm learning here, how can I then use it to create more employment or create a business or to do something bigger? So in terms of that, we have a really big challenge in terms of being able to produce the kind of skill to fit and to drive and to pull Africa along where the rest of the world is going. But even if we're not looking at the rest of the world, where we need to be as a continent where we can feed ourselves, clothe ourselves, house ourselves, because we have all the resources. So why are we not able to pull on them to be able to bring a continent that's fully full employment, equal and good access to employment, to food and all of that. So it's a matter of policies that our governments are not looking into. And also we as citizens are not pushing them towards. It's a very, very big challenge. And I think in the next 10 to 50 years, we'll really be seeing the consequences of not paying enough attention to our education system.
Actually, and this is again very much into what you are saying, and a few comments and few questions here relate to the question of, let's say, of the institutional infrastructure, right? So this is related with the educational system, but this is also related with red tape, with corruption and the lack of systems of support and so on, right? So to what extent this is both shaping your initiatives, so you have to manage, you have to use already, for instance, you were talking about using the formal, the informal system, right? To what extent these are a fundamental part of doing social business, engaging social business, and also scaling up in Africa, right? So it's because it's, as you said, I mean, it's typically assumed when we think about entrepreneurship and in other contexts that there are things that are in place. There are institutions that work, like could be property rights, but could be also data protection regulations, as there is a comment here that was asking explicitly about this. But what happens when these things are either not clear, or I guess they might benefit some, they give advantage to some and not to others, right? So what is this? What is the relevance of this on your daily work?
Yeah, no, starting out, one of the biggest challenges I had was just the paucity of data. And I think this is a problem faced in Nigeria and possibly other parts of Africa as well. There's just not enough relevant data that's useful. And the one thing that helped me during that period was just the strong local context I had, because I just happened to be a local, and I'd kind of grown up hearing about the challenges related to the sector that I was going into. And it's what we're trying to do now is change what would be a challenge into an opportunity, right? Trying to see how we can create insightful data that we're gathering from all the artisans that we're training and use that to help develop the industry. And you find that sometimes it's not like the data isn't there, it's just not readily available for whatever reason. And so it's a major challenge. And I guess speaking more broadly just about systemic issues and challenges in Nigeria and other parts of Africa, it's one of the things that you definitely have to come to terms with, and you have to come to terms with quickly. And that's why I would certainly encourage anyone interested in, coming to Nigeria, Africa, particularly if you're from outside the continent, to develop really strong roots, just boots on the ground, people that understand the local context and can help you navigate. It's also important to kind of forge partnerships, and where possible, to just simply create your own oasis of sanity, right? Sometimes the solution really is in not trying to do everything, and just finding out that niche and sticking to it and growing from there. If you can, I guess, test out your business model and you succeed in a tiny form, and then you just start to grow and scale with that. But certainly, if you were to look at all the challenges, you may not you may not start to begin with.
I don't know if you want to add something to that. Otherwise, something that is also related with this, and a few comments that are put on here on the chat. What about access to capital, in fact? And you mentioned this before, but for instance, there are references here to philanthropy. I don't know if there's things on social impact. I mean, there's this whole discussion about social impact bonds, on venture philanthropy, and all those. How far is this from your day reality? And in any case, what about the challenges of having access to capital to start your, let me put it this way, your crazy initiatives?
I think in my experience, South Africa especially, or let me say rather Southern Africa, our model of doing or raising funding, you're basically better off bootstrapping to a certain level and then starting to apply for funding. So it's different from, let's say, an American model where you can write a business plan, then go for Series A funding, Series B funding, or whatever. Funding is something that's very difficult to come by, especially at this time. There's a lot of funds that are available, but they're available for certain sectors. So there's a lot of funds currently available for fintech, for example. There's a lot of funding available for people who are going into infrastructure, mining, that kind of a thing. But for those of us who are, in social business, it's very difficult to come by funding. And I think what's happening, we're seeing an emergence of funds that are African generated funds, where the investors are people who understand the context of the continent, whereas in previous times, like 10 years ago, the majority of funds available here were funds that are coming outside of the country, and those funders who don't understand the continent the way they need to in order to invest in different sectors. So they stick to the big sectors that they understand and that have faster returns. And a lot of funders obviously don't see the returns or the necessity for, funding social businesses. And I must say that in the past few months, in the past 18 to 24 months, there's been less funding available for social businesses, and I guess it's because of the way the economy is currently, where there aren't that many funds available generally for that kind of a thing. And yeah, the best way I've found is just to bootstrap, and there's a lack of data as well to make a good business case, except for if you're exporting. I think one of the questions you mentioned earlier was around data protection and access to data. In terms of data protection, I think most of our countries are sorted. Your data is protected, and there's good laws in place to protect your data as a company. But let's say you want access to data just to understand an economy, how, what's the economy in Nigeria? What are people buying? What's the buying power of people in Nigeria? That information is almost impossible to come by. You've got organizations like Nielsen's who produce amazing reports for markets like Spain, like France, but that kind of data and reports, you don't get it for the African continent, and yet there's money that's moving all of the time. So that's something that a lot of investors don't come to understand, and so they prefer to invest in the kind of industries and sectors that are currently making headway in the rest of the world. So as I said, fintech at the moment, health tech as well. And I guess food businesses like Claudia's are easier to fund than, let's say, a cosmetic or personal care business like my own.
Just to add on that, what Ntombenhle said, it's interesting. I was just thinking about how long it took for Black Mamba to finally raise capital. You know, it took us 10 years to finally, we just actually closed a deal 2 weeks ago, which is brilliant because I think it's a big success in terms of being a small social business in Africa to get attention, enough attention from an international like venture fund to invest in our company. But this is after 10 years. And along the way, one of the things that we saw is, as Ntombenhle says, you can have a brilliant business plan. You can have sort of the very clear idea, strategic focus on what you need. But what we had for many years, probably 3 or 4 years that we've been looking for this, was the fact like, you're too small, you're in Africa, we don't know exactly the sort of business model, how it's kind of going to work there. So bootstrapping, literally the business for 10 years. But then another thing that is quite important, I guess, for entrepreneurs, when you look at capital, it's not necessarily per se investment in terms of a fund that would invest in your business. There are other options that could allow you to help on that bootstrapping or cash trap business that you have. For Black Mambas, a social business, one thing that we took advantage early along the line was in the fact that we, besides making a profit, besides willing to be profitable, we were willing to make positive impact in our communities. And there are quite a few organizations out there, European Union, World Bank, that are willing to support that sort of initiatives. So on the side, it's not going to be the sort of like huge capital injection that you need to scale your business, but is that investment that allows you to keep on growing organically till you get to that moment when you are able and you're potentially, you know, prepared enough to attract the attention of those funds. So I saw one of the questions was like tips on like how do we get access to that. Grants is a great opportunity. Before then, I've heard of quite a few successful opportunities of crowdfunding as well. There's of course loans. You don't want to be necessarily going to a bank when it's too early, but I can tell you that family and friends in our specific case and our own funds really believing in the power of your business is what makes you go through. And I know the word that a lot of people use for entrepreneurs is perseverance. You have to be perseverant, like you have no idea. And I call it stubbornness. My husband also calls it stubbornness. You're so stubborn, but it's like when you really believe in your idea, you will find a way to make it happen. No matter what, no matter how many times you're going to be crying on the floor, no matter how many times you're going to hate everything you do, is like, I don't want to do this anymore ever again. You'll find a way to stand up, go back and persevere till you get that. I guess that's a big sort of definition on that part of the capital for sure.
Did you, I guess that's a question for the three of you. How many times did you think I'm going to give up? I mean, it is too much.
A million.
I just thought this yesterday, Ignacy.
Okay.
Only partially kidding. Honestly, it's a thought that crosses your mind more often than you would like. But to Claudia's point, really, it's the passion that keeps you going. And also, if you really have, if you're sure that what you're doing is making an impact and you've sort of already seen the fruits of that, even if it's in a small scale, it just almost wants to, it galvanizes you to keep going because you just want to, you almost imagine what could I do at a much larger scale. And so, the challenges will come. There are funding challenges. There are challenges related to talents. There are challenges related to the fiscal and regulatory environment you're in. There are challenges related to just operations, and sometimes you feel very much alone, like you're in it alone. So even if you do have the backing of friends and just supporters in general, there are days when you just have to go it alone and becomes more of a mental battle than anything else. Just overcoming the limitations you placed on your mind. And in those days, what you then do is you just have to dig deep and find that different perspective that just creates a shift and helps you pick up the baton and keep running.
It's the same thing for you and Ntombenhle?
Yeah, well, for me, whenever I feel like, oh my God, what is my next step now? I don't think I've really gotten to a point where I felt I want to give up, because I'm so passionate about seeing the change I want to see on the continent. And I also know that, I'm one of the first few female manufacturers and producers of products in South Africa, especially a Black woman. South Africa is a very interesting economy. We have, and I think it's very similar to Swaziland as well, we have a formal retail sector. So I think maybe, I don't know what in Spain it would be the equivalent of your Carrefours or your your Altas in America or your Walmarts in America. We have a formal, very formalized retail sector like that. And then we have a very informal sector as well. But all the same, whenever you walk in those stores, the majority of those products are not produced on the continent. So if you're thinking of how much stuff is coming, is owned by Unilever, Procter & Gamble, you name it, food products, we don't produce them to sell in our own supermarkets. So whenever I walk through a supermarket and I'm looking at what's on shelf, 90% of those products are not produced by African entrepreneurs. And that for me is what keeps me wanting to continue going. There needs to be that are producers and supplying Africa in order to grow the economy. So yeah, quitting for me doesn't arise because there's still so much. I've got a passion for the change that I want to see. So yeah, it keeps me inspired.
And I guess this is related with the passion that all of you are sharing, and I think everyone is feeling that very, very strongly, right? But there is one of the questions here. This is one of the typical questions that are posed when we think about social businesses, which is, the idea is that you are combining, let's say, a social purpose, which is clear in your case, right, with the fact that you have to make this sustainable, financially speaking, right? How do you do that? How do you, because beyond all these different things that you have been sharing so generously with us today, how do you make sure that these things are, you don't go too much into that financial, but you are not perceived as because you are not, the purpose is not to create an NGO, right? So how do you do this? How do you balance these different tensions, and so that it doesn't kind of split into different sort of organizations?
Well, I'm happy to answer first. I think right from the beginning, it was clear that, in order for OPL to be sustainable, we needed to find out where our sources of funding were going to come from. And so even though OPL is set up as an NGO, what we've done is, yes, target organizations that can give us grant funding, but at the same time, we're also seeking ways to earn our own revenue, right? Just piggybacking off of our core services and offering value to clients that are willing to pay for that. So just because we're a non-for-profit doesn't mean that, we're not aiming to earn revenue or be profitable to some extent. And so for us, that's important, right? And we spend quite a bit of time wearing both hats, right? The nonprofit hat, but also, the for-profit hat as well. Thinking about business development and how we're going to get more clients on board, and also how we're placing our people in jobs where we can, also earn a commission from clients off of the linkages that we're able to form. I know that when I started, it wasn't this clear to me, because I started out and I was very much on the left side. All I wanted to do was make a difference, make an impact. I didn't care about profit. I didn't care about money or funding. And I guess I got some sort of balance when I went through my private equity experience and I saw that finance can be used for good. But I also think that sometimes it's just helpful to have the right sorts of people on your team, right? So if you do realize that you're more tilted in one way, maybe then it's helpful to have an advisor or like a colleague or someone that's constantly wearing the other hat and that can, give you that balance that you need.
I guess for us, it was never a matter. I don't even know how to phrase this properly, but when I arrived to Eswatini, there are a myriad of NGOs. There are a myriad of NGOs that are not necessarily the right NGOs for our context, as in Eswatini. There were many NGOs that were here literally with what you said before, Ignacio, on the white savior complex. It's like we need to come here and save Africa and give things for free. And one thing that I've noticed as an entrepreneur and as a business person is that when you give things for free, there's no ownership and there's no accountability in terms of business. We saw that very clearly with our farmers at the beginning, where we would give those seedlings for free, and then we would come and say, well, what happens with the seedlings, with the chilies? Is it working? It's like, oh, we had a communal meeting and then all the seeds were eaten by birds. So there was no accountability because they didn't have to pay for them. So what we started doing is like, you know what, we will give you the seedlings, you will pay for them as part of deductions on within all the produce that you give from us. The following time that we went to see that, we were giving 2,000 seedlings, and I remember asking the women farmers, how are the seedlings doing? And I said, Claudia, you didn't give us 2,000, you gave us 1,987. So that created for me the view that we need to create a mentality of business women. And I always say the farmers that we grow with, you are business bomage. Bomage is the word for women in Siswati. It's like, this is not a charity. This is not, we're doing this. We're doing all to make a change and a significant impact in our lives. And we need accountability and we need a mentality where we teach also our farmers how to use, like basic financial sort of education, so they know what to do with their money. They understand costings and everything related to that. And the reason why Black Mamba started doing that is because we saw that the model that we've seen here of like hands out is what personally, very humbly, think is a hindrance on the development that Africa can have. If you feel like you don't have to do anything and you put your hand like this and there's an NGO that is going to come and give you a parcel of food, you're not really teaching people to how to start growing their own food, how to start actually working towards their own sort of resilience and independence, economic independence. So that was something that for us was very, very important from the beginning, and it's something that we've seen has worked for us. That's why we set up Black Mamba to be a business. In that particular sense, we wanted to make sure that something is profitable, investable, and that could attract education from that point of view in the communities we work with, but also interest from investors so that we could actually scale the impact that we have as well.
You want to add something, Ntombenhle?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with Claudia. I feel that, for the longest time, I guess the whole aid thing for Africa has really crippled us. And it has, in the space that I'm working in trying to get women to develop their own agency, that's where it comes from. And, like Claudia said, if you give people things for free, they don't value it. So I've also had to learn to create a pop-up business model for the women. Like I was able to fund a machine for extracting marula oil for a group of women in the eastern part of South Africa. And I made sure that they set up, oh gosh, stop it. They set up a proper organization, a proper cooperative, and that signed agreements, and that they pay me back for that machine. And they were taught the basics. Government was able to come in and teach them the basics of running a cooperative, how they must reinvest the money. When they get their payments for their oil, they don't then go and buy what they need in their homes, which is what they desperately need stuff. But at the end of the day, they want to keep the business going so that it can be sustainable. So those are the great things in the kind of business model that we are in. And in terms of myself, when I started the business, I was very clear. I don't want anything from government. I don't want to rely on government, because if I relied on government for anything, I probably wouldn't be where I am right now. And whenever I do fundraise, and I've only been funding myself through loans, really. And it's purely on the back of a solid business plan with a proven track record, but it's had its own challenges, convincing our own people that a product produced by a Black African female is of good quality, as good as, or even better than a Nivea, is a huge mindset shift for our people. So, you know, Africa has a lot of potential, for creators on the continent and investors from outside of the continent. And we just have to navigate things with integrity and with a clear understanding of who we are and what it is we want to create and the legacy we want to leave.
I think we're getting to. I mean, we are already 6 minutes over the time that we give us, but I think that is so exciting and interesting. So, if you don't mind, I'm gonna take 2 more questions. The first one is related with something that you were mentioning, which is so you were talking, for instance, Claudia, you were talking about the farmers, right? And now in Ntombenhle, you were talking about I mean, making sure that these people actually feel proud about what can be produced in Africa, right? But how do you make sure that that they believe in you? How to make sure that they are on board? In particular, if there's a question here, say when they don't see early success, right? How do you make sure that these potential workers already, they are on board, right? So that they keep on coming and believing on you, right? Is this a challenge?
I think in my particular case, from the very beginning, we were very strict with the financial part of the business. And one thing that we never, ever were late, not even once, was on paying our farmers their due rates based on contracts that we had, and paying our employees the due salaries based on contract that we have. You only build accountability when you provide accountability, when you're accountable to your employees, when you're accountable to your value chain. Then nobody would believe me out of the blue. You know, they would see me cutting chilies in the kitchen and doing like that with the pots. Nobody would believe that it would become something bigger if it wasn't because I was very serious with that. There were many months and throughout years that I didn't even pay a salary for myself because there was no money. You know, but I couldn't care. I needed to sort out the people that are actually investing their life and trusting us to actually make this happen. So it was very tough financially, but I think from the very beginning, when you have that very clear, how would people believe you? I think because of you being accountable to them, but I guess also because people see that sort of crazy passion that you have about what you want. I mean, it's the only way. I remember going to the bank very early, very emboldened because I had like this amazing business plan that I just created. And I went to the bank with my business plan, and the general manager of the bank said, "Well, what's your collateral?" I didn't even know what collateral back then was very clear, you know, like I've never done business in English. And I was like, collateral? What do you, I mean, if I had money, I would have come here to ask you for money, you know? But I was so emboldened that I said, you know what my collateral is? This. And that's all I did. And I said, this is all I have to offer. And you believe me or not that I'll be able to do this happen. And I think the guy was so impressed about that and the fact that say, this woman is crazy, but there might be some sort of like method in her badness that we got our loan. It was the first time. And after 1 year that we created Black Mamba. So I guess you just really convince people by being trustworthy, by being accountable, but also when you translate that sort of passion, they say, you know what, she's going to make it happen because she's so determined and so focused, even though she looks crazy.
Yeah. So for me, it's same thing with Claudia, is ensuring that we pay people on time all the time. And, you know, I started the business in 2011. It took me up until 2015 to be able to get my product on retail shelves. And it was literally selling one person at a time, and that person recommending word of mouth to the next woman, and then me encouraging them to write good recommendations and reviews for me on our website and on social media. Thank goodness Facebook was already in place then. So we used a lot of Facebook to tell our story, to tell our story of sustainability, to tell our story of impact and empowerment. And that's how we were able to start building a tribe of women who are still loyal to this day. You know, I've got customers that I used to go to deliver products to personally that still go to the stores now. And, you know, I remember when I approached retailers at first, they all laughed at me. They had never gotten a product that's made by, a female on shelf, and they didn't see how that would be possible. And of course, I ran into the challenge that they saw. Luckily, there was a big demand already for my product, and I used a lot of PR. I sent products out to media, to influencers who reviewed positively my product, and there was a demand. Customers wanted the product. But then, of course, I ran into the problem of, retail is a huge, big boy business. It's not for a person coming in with just 10 products. It's for people who have hundreds of products to sell. So obviously, I ran into the challenges of not being able to meet and deliver product on orders on time, or the orders being too big. All of those challenges. But, open communication and transparency, I never presented myself as a big business. I was very clear that I'm a small business that's growing, and I'm not able to do the orders right now because I need to raise money. And, it's interesting how corporate actually came on board. They started making their payment terms much easier for me. I've got partners who pay me within 14 days. I've got a partner that pays me within 7 days. So that kind of a thing starts to make it easier. But it's all about transparency and people being able to see your vision and buy into your vision, and wanting to be part of the change that they see is necessary in the country and on the continent.
Ori, if you want. We cannot hear you, I think. You are mute, I think.
Apologies, guys.
Oh.
So yeah, I was just going to say that buy-in is extremely important. I think for us, a lot of the tradesmen and women were jaded coming in because they didn't really believe that we were going to do what we said we're going to do. And so we run a very meritocratic system. I tell people that the Excel sheet is what determines when you get placed in jobs, because literally it's based on your performance in class, it's based on your participation, it's based on everything. So at the end of the day, we compute those scores, and then that determines how quickly you get placed in a job. Another thing I would say, it's important that you're offering something that your people want, your beneficiaries want. So whether they're women, whether they're young people, for us, we're trying to offer these people microinsurance, microcredit, affordable tools and equipment, power tools and equipment, just to make their work easier. And so these are things that they desperately want that can improve their lifestyle. And so you get a sense that they're trying to hold on to this dream and to work with us to just, make sure that it succeeds.
Thank you very much. I think it's going to be time to finish, but I have, just because he insisted and posed the question twice, there is a question I would like to raise to, and you decide who to take it, right? So the question is the following. So Kenya, Mauritius, and the other countries in Africa are developing GDPR-inspired data protection regulations following the European model, right? Can this reduce entrepreneurship but complicated compliance? And could these policies reduce foreign investment from countries like the US and China with a different idea of data protection? Some of you talk about data protection. So what do you think about this? Any thought on that?
So I didn't really get the question clearly.
So if you think that if countries like, it's referring to Kenya, Mauritius, and perhaps other countries in Africa are developing GDPR-inspired data protection like Europe, I assume. So can this reduce entrepreneurship by reducing compliance first? And second, could these policies reduce foreign investment from countries such as China or the US that have a different data protection idea?
Well, in my experience, in South Africa, we've also got an interesting data protection, but it's policies in place, but they're not as extensive as they are in Europe, for example. I think the tricky part in Africa, I'm not sure about Mauritius, for example, but the tricky part of Mauritius, in Africa, is that a lot of the time the data protection is more political than it is around business issues. So whether it's a matter of people trying to control information, access to information, or the ability for people to be able to communicate or to share information. It differs country to country on what the intention of the policy is. At the moment, especially in South Africa or Southern Africa, those data protection laws are not yet an inhibitor or a restrictor for us in terms of business. And I think quite a few of the countries, a lot of the countries have laws that are quite fair in terms of protecting investors and also protecting businesses. So as yet, but I have seen cases like in Tanzania, I've seen cases in Zimbabwe and in Zambia, where data protection policies are being used as political tools. I'm not sure yet, I haven't understood yet what kind of economic impact they have, especially on entrepreneurship.
Okay, so perhaps just to finish, if you could, there are few of the comments and questions. There were people that either consider or they started social businesses in different parts of in Africa, but also in India. If you had to give people that are thinking, that are considering, or even starting a social business in Africa, but also in other contexts, what would be your, sorry for this, but one sentence piece of advice to them? What would you tell them?
All right, I'm happy to go first. I mean,
okay,
it's emphasizing what I said before. It's really emphasizing what I said before. You need to have really strong local knowledge and context. It's super important. So especially if you're from the outside looking in, it's important that you develop that knowledge. You do whatever research you can, if possible, boots on the ground, travel to wherever it is you're thinking about setting up, and just mingle, hear the local stories. If you can, do a shadow program with someone that's doing something similar to what it is you're trying to do. It's typically the best way to go about this, because there are a lot of cultural, political complexities that can only just imagine, right? So it typically would take you getting your hands dirty to uncover some of those things.
Following on what Oare said, I would say I am from Oare, Ntombenhle. I'm the only sort of like foreigner that came to Africa to start her business. And again, following exactly what Oare said, you need to understand your context. Africa humbles you. For everybody that is coming with a white savior complex, you be in Africa for 3 or 4 months and you forget about it. Africa doesn't need to be saved. What it needs is people that understand context and is willing to work within that context. And I would say the second thing that I always tell anybody that comes to me and said, I want to become an entrepreneur. And I always tell them, if your driving force is the money, don't do it, because it's not strong enough for when times are tough. So if you really want to do something in terms of entrepreneurship, and I think this corresponds to Africa or anywhere else, you need to have a very strong driving force. You need to be extremely passionate, like Oare and Ntombenhle mentioned about what their passions are. I have a very strong passion. That is what makes me wake up every morning. So if you're really interested in doing things, make sure that you have a passion that allows you to still wake up from the bed the days that you really don't feel like waking up from the bed, basically.
You know, I would say everything the ladies have said already. But I think importantly, your model should be one that really empowers and engages people, you know, especially the local community. And, you know, I'm biased in saying this, but I think I would always look at working with women organizations, because the women are, you know, the center, and they're the roots of their communities, and they'll do anything to see a project that empowers them and empowers their children to see that through. That's what that would be my piece of advice. Thank
you very much. Thank you. I can thanks so much for sharing so much wisdom, in fact, and so much humility as well. It's been, for me, a really extraordinary session. So thank you very much. Now I think I'm going to give the last word to Ursi, right, to perhaps to conclude.
Yes. So, well, I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. So we will be sending you a survey by email because we would like to receive your feedback. And we will definitely be planning more of those webinars in the future. I had a look at attendance list, and I'm very happy to see that we had a very diverse public here. I saw a lot of familiar names. I know some of you have already started their social entrepreneur journey, and others that are thinking about it. I know there are also some people that are representing companies or international organizations that want or that are collaborating with social entrepreneurs. So I'm very happy to see here all together, to see together all the important stakeholders, right, of the social entrepreneur journey. I'm quite confident that you will leave the session with a lot of food for thoughts and new insights and best practices. And also I would say a new network of 3 amazing women social entrepreneurs to connect with. So I would say if you have ideas for collaborations, feel free to reach out to them. And I would say if there are any investors here, raise your hand, right? You never know. I mean, when people ask me who inspires you most, without any doubt, I would say social entrepreneurs like Claudia, like Oare, like Ntombenhle, and just because of the passion, right, that you put in your work and the positive impact that you have on society. So I would like to thank the 3 of you for sharing your valuable insights. And I would also like to invite you to check out Esade Social Innovation and Entrepreneurship Institutes. And of course, also thank Ignacy for leading this conversation. And I would say stay healthy to all of you. And we hope to see you, in one of our upcoming events. So thank you for being here.